Well, that's a wonderful introduction. I thank you all so much for letting me be with you and share some thoughts with you. It's a privilege for me. I listened to that introduction, and there's an old story about when that happens. If your father's in the audience, he'd wonder who they were talking about. If your mother's here, she'd believe every word of it. But I want to recognize first, before we get into the talk, Ed Nicholson. It is incredible what he has done. He has saved lives by his work. And I think we owe him a great debt of gratitude for his work that he's done for all of us. Doug Deere is another one. Doug has given of his time, his talent, his treasure to support this organization. I have only one concern about Doug, is that he asked me to speak following Tom Brokaw. That's sort of like asking me to play in the Super Bowl after Tom Brady, but I accept Doug's invitation. I will note one thing about Doug's talent is that he is so talented that if you note, there's a sign on this big pool, the home pool, that says, "Do not get on the bank, don't sit in the bank, he wants to protect the bank." He has trained his dog that if anyone is sitting on the bank, the dog believes it's a fire hydrant. This is a true story. And one of my fishing group was trespassing by sitting on that bank, and the dog took the appropriate action. And I know that Doug had trained that dog to do that. Well, it's a great honor. You know, I was walking up here, I was thinking about, we have a fishing group, several are here tonight, and we have a mantra that we talk about after a few drinks, and it's called "It's All About Honor." Several are former military families like I am. And I was thinking about reputation in the introduction, and you know, your reputation is what other people think they know about you. But honor is what you know about yourself and what you can do and have done. And tonight, we have men and women of honor and character and perseverance to honor before us. And it's a great honor for me to be able to speak to them. Tonight we're going to talk about a couple of disabled veterans that really changed my life. One particularly, Navy Chief Jack Allen, was probably the reverse healing waters. He gave me the great lifelong gift of fly fishing when I was a youngster and had some difficulties. As you heard, I come from a military family. Not only my father spent almost 40 years in, and he was wounded when the ship was sunk, but recovered and was able to finish his career. But it led him to get heavily involved as a medical doctor in rehabilitation, and he considered that his main goal as he went through the Navy. My brother then followed him for 25 years as a Navy doctor as well. I was the black sheep. I became a lawyer. The doctors don't like lawyers. I got back in the family by marrying a doctor. When I became a federal judge, I sort of got another notch up in the family. Somewhat accepted that I had not become a doctor. Now, you know, I'm a federal judge. I've been on the bench about 35 years, and I've had some fascinating cases. I had all the Guantanamo Bay detainee cases. I had investigations involving 3 separate presidents I oversaw. I had a Secretary of Defense who was indicted before me. We have a lot of constitutional issues. Our court is something that some of the lawyers call the big court. We have really wonderful, challenging cases. One of them, the ones I had, was a Colombian drug dealer many years ago, one of the first big-time ones we got back to this country. In the midst of that trial, the prosecution came to me and said, there are 4 hitmen that we have determined that the friends of this fellow in Colombia have sent up to assassinate the prosecutor and the judge. Now, this is where I have a problem. I hate to say this, with a former Marine. Because what happened was the particular marshal, deputy marshal, assigned to protect me and my family. We had several, but one we'll call Charlie. Charlie was one of the best pistol shots in the Marshal Service, former Marine from the hills of Kentucky. And that particular evening, he was patrolling our backyard. It was a lovely spring evening. Our windows in our bedroom were open, and the yard was right below the backyard of our bedroom. About 2 a.m., I am startled, as some of you experienced, I'm sure, in the battle to hear two loud shots, without question, gunshots right below my window. I was scared. The family's in the house. We had hitmen. So we went downstairs. I went downstairs. I crept to the patio door, opened it up, and I looked. And there's the marshal, thank heaven, standing there. And literally, he's holding in his hand a smoking gun. So I said, "Charlie, are we okay? What's happened?" He said, "Don't worry, Judge. I got that sucker." So I thought, I've got a dead assassin in my backyard. But there are three others. I don't know where they are. And I was a little worried. So I started to say something to Charlie, and he continued then, "Judge, that raccoon will never get into your garbage can again." That's absolutely true. The next day, as my hair became the color it is now, I guarantee you. But that was my Marine. And he took care of us. But the problem of being a judge does lead one to find the solitude of fly fishing and find recovery and sort of regeneration in fly fishing that I think some here have experienced now. I took many times fishing Justice Scalia. He was a great friend and a wonderful companion. And as you know his reputation, he was a fierce arguer. He loved to fight for his position in the law. And it was delightful to be with, but his practice in fishing was the same as he attacked the lawyers, and that was the harder he threw the fly in the water and slapped his line down, the more he thought that the fish would respond. And he got more upset when they didn't. There's something called a fishing privilege among us, and I won't go further, but he was a delightful companion to be with, but his fishing prowess was somewhat limited. But we have him replaced now by Justice Gorsuch. I know Justice Gorsuch. He is from Colorado, and he's a fly fisherman, and a pretty good fly fisherman, actually. So in the future, we hope we'll get him down here to see you and visit with you all. But tonight, really, this is all about, and I 10 years ago spoke briefly about this, and I'll give you the full story tonight, is about a couple of disabled veterans that really helped me in my life. One particularly, as mentioned, Chief Allen, turned my life around. And I think it's an example of how the courage and perseverance of the severely wounded veterans is such an example to others, how much we owe them for that. The background of this I have to tell you a little bit about. I think judges should be private, not discuss their situations in public, but it's necessary you understand what we're doing here. And my fishing crew, probably most of them have no idea about this. In 1949, we have to go back a long way because I'm pretty old, I was 11 years old. We lived in a Navy base near San Francisco. My father was head of the hospital there. And I have been born with a severe birth defects. They caused great difficulties, a lot of surgeries, a lot of illnesses throughout my life, really up through law school. But modern medicine is what it is, and it helped me very much. But 11 years old, I was barred from sports, and I really had no activities except I found fishing. I found an old bait rod, and I'd go to a local pond and catch sunnies and bass, and that seemed to help. I then subscribed through a paper route money to Field and Stream. Now, I read Field and Stream cover to cover. I read every story in it, and I was thrilled by it. And I read it sort of like a 16-year-old boy reads a secret copy of Playboy he has. I was really into this book about all the flies and the trout and the salmon, all these great outdoorsmen. So I decided I could tie a fly and go fishing. I had never seen a fly in my life. I saw pictures in the magazine. I took from my mother's sewing box some ribbons and a big colorful flower, something she had there with it, and I got some feathers from the yard and a bird and a big bait hook, and I tied them together. And I suspect it looked like a psychedelic dead sparrow, I think. And I took it to the closest water I could get to, and that was to the big ornamental goldfish pond on the base. And there were big goldfish in there. But I vainly, obviously, tried to get the goldfish to bite my fly when I had a hand clamping my shoulder. And I was arrested by the military police. When they found out I was a commandant's son, they released me to custody of my mother. But that night, my dad came home. He was not upset, but he said to me, if you really are interested in this fly fishing thing, and he was a golfer, he was not into fly fishing. He said, there's a Navy chief, a patient of mine I've been working with. He's a great outdoorsman. He had lived in Alaska for the last 3 years. He had been raised in the Northwest. He's a hunter, fisherman. He knows everything about it. You should go see him. His name is Chief Jack Allen. He lives down in a temporary quarters, a Quonset hut, down about 3 blocks away. So the next day I got on my bike, I rode down there, knocked on his door, very excited to find a real outdoorsman, somebody could tell me something about what I've been reading about. And the door opened, and he said, hi, Tommy, come on in. And I stood frozen in place. And the reason was he was in a wheelchair with 2 stubs for legs. And this hand he offered me was mangled. That obviously brought me to a place I couldn't quite grasp this. But he was kind and insistent. I came in, and we became the very closest of friends. For 6 months, almost every day I could get free, I went down to see him. He taught me all the technical aspects about fly fishing. Many, many wonderful stories that he told me, as well as how to string up a fly rod. We went and bought my first fly rod together, an automatic reel, a fly line. He taught me how to tie knots. He tried to teach me to tie flies, which I was not very good at. And he taught me to cast. Now, Lefty Cray's not here tonight. I wish he was, because he would be shocked at the military style technique I was given to learn fly fishing, how to cast a fly. And that was, he put, in place of a fly on the end of a short leader, a small nail. So that if I lost my attention as I'm going back and forth and began to wave the rod around, the nail would hit me in the head. And for an 11-year-old boy, it was easy to lose my attention, and this brought it back, I can guarantee you. We eventually graduated to flies, and he put a bucket out about 30 feet away and wanted me to cast this fly in the bucket. And occasionally I could do that. But he really taught me much more. He taught me so much about overcoming adversity. He taught me perseverance and to go on despite the difficulties we had. I never heard him complain about his situation. I'm sure I complained about mine. He never said a word to me about his problems. He continued to teach me without complaint. I'm sure I was a pest. He's just totally unselfish in his time and effort that he gave his time, what he gave to me. And that gift of fly fishing then has turned out to be a gift that's lasted for me almost 70 years. It has brought me peace and joy. It brought me close friends, camaraderie among some extraordinary people I fish with, and it's taken me to beautiful rivers and wonderful fish. And that's what it all really is about, what this disabled vet did for me. It's not what I did for him, and that's a tremendous experience. What it really gets down to is the essence of fly fishing really being taking you to healing waters, and the apt name for this project is perfect. The waters that heal. I use a phrase to describe what I think about fly fishing, an Italian word. It's called qui si sana. Qui si sana, if you look it up, means a place you go to be healed, or a place you go to heal one's self. And that's what you do when you go fly fishing. When you come to the beautiful Rose River, you fish the Potomac River, you fish some of the pristine Montana rivers and float those. Wherever it may be, it takes you back to a place where you're comfortable, where you can be healed, where you can sort of recenter yourself and get away from the cares and the dangers that you have in your life. The moment when you cast that fly and you make that connection to the fish, you feel that tug, your cares and your concerns fade away. You're suddenly back with the fish, away from your difficulties you've been facing. It's a tremendous relief. You know, Hemingway, and this is, I know, scientifically shown now, but in the past, Hemingway, who's one of my favorite writers, wrote a wonderful short story called The Big Two-Hearted River. And that's a two-part story where Nick Adams, the main character in the story, is a young man who comes and gets off a train, and there's been a forest fire, and the area he comes to is devastated. He goes on a hike up to a river he wants to get to. When he gets to the river, it's green and verdant, and there are fish rising, and he catches a trout, and he sort of recovers his spirit, and you can tell he's been very upset. The real story is, this whole story is about returning from war. And Hemingway wrote about the meaning of the story. He wrote it in his early 20s when he had finished being in World War I, and the story is about a veteran returning from war, although the name of war never is mentioned. But that's what the story's about. It's about the rejuvenation of the spirit by getting back to the fly fishing. And that's what it has done for me as well. I can't, I think, express enough for what this wounded veteran has done for me, Jack Allen. And I'm going to finish with a short another story about another wounded veteran, a judge in my court, Jack Pratt, Judge John Pratt. John Pratt was a Marine in World War II. He fought his way through the Pacific, and he came home without a left arm and a crushed right hip. He went to law school, married, had 5 children, and became a pretty good golfer. And I think he thought that he liked the golf. He thought he was pretty good about it, playing it. He, however, had a crusty Marine exterior, but took me on as a new young judge and helped me get settled in as a judge and put me there in the right place to go forward as a judge through his, again, unselfish and generous time. He had a great sense of humor. One day, we have a judge's dining room. We have a private room for the judges so we can sit down and talk frankly without worrying about Washington Post writing about what we're saying. And we discuss openly issues and problems. This particular day, there were about 8 or 10 older judges, and myself and Judge Pratt. Now, I knew Judge Pratt's right hip hurt him every day, and he never said a word about that, and I knew that his arm obviously caused him difficulties with his situation. The older judges began a conversation that happens when you're my age about their aches and pains. They went through their ankles and their knees and their hips and their prostates, and this went on for about 20 minutes. Judge Pratt had not said a word. Another judge walks in and says, "Hey, if I missed anything in conversation," and Pratt, without missing a beat, says, "Nothing but another goddamn organ recital." That's the Marine for you. That still was in Judge Pratt. But really, what the story is about, this generosity of these disabled vets who took me under their wing and helped me as much as I can try to go back, give back now, in a little bit to what I have benefited from them. This healing waters is something that is real, and I encourage the vets who are here who have not done it to try to get involved in it. It'll make your life better. I can never thank enough Jack Allen for what he gave me for 70 years of fishing and relaxation after being through some difficult times. And I don't think I can thank each of you here tonight who have spent your time defending your country and coping with your injuries, or the families for what all you have done. Your examples each day of your perseverance, your courage, and your sacrifice is phenomenal. All I can say is I thank you, and I hope that fly fishing will be your Quisasana, will be your place. You can go and be healed. Thank you very much.